Some of the movements that we're doing in Pantsula were inspired by the trains. When the train is moving, then we play outside and try up until the train moves faster, and then the sound of the train goes like katla 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 katla, and then there's movements that we're doing. It's the basic movements.
Pantsula emerged in the 1950s as a cultural form, mainly by young men who felt that they needed to express themselves differently. They wanted to feel cool, they wanted to be the ones who were respected in the township.
Because we were staying in the townships, this is where we developed our own way of communicating, our fashion and music. And most of the time the music were inspired by the jazz music. And the fashion were inspired by the Italians. And even the movements, most of the time, our dance were inspired by African American dances and other traditional dance forms.
Pantsula is about style and panache. Fast-paced dance that is influenced by American tap dance and other South African cultural forms like gumboot dance.
If we go back into history, right, we can see with the clothing itself. We can see where the inspiration comes from. We can mention genres like jazz, funk, you know. We can mention places like Sophia Town, Deep Soweto. Pantsula has a lot of shaky, sharp, disruptive movements within it. That sort of like gives you a hint of the history, of the emotional attachment that gets attached to a performer or a normal human being, because Pantsula was not just done by performing artists, it was done by people in the community. And therefore, if we want to speak about people in the community and speak to people in the community, we use an art form that comes from the community itself.
The movements that we are doing as Pantsula, it speaks with our daily life basis. When we have to catch a taxi, there's a sign that you're doing. When you catch a taxi, you whistle, and then after whistling, and then the person in the taxi would look, the taxi driver, and then there's movements that we do. Also, you'll find situations where we are playing the dice. It's like a gambling. So when we are gambling and the dice, it's forbidden in our country. So we would play that, and then after the same time we check the coast if the police are coming or what. And then there's movements that we do that portrays that situation. So this is how we do it with Pantsula. And sometimes a lady that is moving, and then someone is whistling, calling that lady, trying to charm the lady. There's movements that we're doing via that. Pantsula, it's a culture, but the sad part of Pantsula is that it was not taken seriously as a professional dance form. As us, as Via Katlehong, this is where we also, when we step to overseas, this is where we started to take it seriously as a profession. We chose to work with Gregory Maqoma because of Greg. We used to meet with him many times, and we would tease each other and say, Greg, one day we want to build a show with you. Greg is one of that person who has ideas, and he would say, okay, yes, I can build a show with you, and I know what I want to talk about. And he said, I want to talk about the Kanana.
The title of Via Kanana comes from the biblical story of Canaan, the promised land, the world of milk and honey. This is very much symbolic to our democracy in South Africa, where so many promises were made for the people of South Africa, and none of them were delivered within our democracy. And this piece, Via Kanana, talks about that, talks about the poverty that surrounds the people of Katlehong in particular, because the cast comes from that place. And I wanted to tackle those issues head on and to use the stories of the dancers who are coming from the township to tell their own demise, to be able to tell their own stories through this work.
During the apartheid, the black people used to fight, and we used to fight for freedom. So now as black people, we got the freedom, and then our political leaders, they started to have the corruption. And the issue of corruption, it's affecting the country big time. It's affecting our kids. It's affecting generation and generation in the country. It also affects the economy of the country. It affects us in many ways. Via Kanana show, it's a very beautiful show, and it's very emotional at the same time, because it shows that as young people, how brave we are, because we are brave enough to come forward and say it's enough.
For the creation of Via Kanana, it was important for me to be able to travel into the township of Katlehong, which is based in the eastern part of Johannesburg. What makes it to be important is that I needed to absorb every detail of the township. I needed to get in touch with the realities of the people who were living in the township, because mainly the work is centered around the township circumstances and those who live with them. All the cast members are born and bred in Katlehong, hence also the company name is Via Katlehong. That is a symbolism of the work that comes out from that township, that comes out from that company.
If you look at the word Kanana, even in the Bible, it's recorded as the Promised Land. It's what we are sold, what we are told. So our major theme revolved around corruption and political corruption. And not just political in the form that our political parties, but also in our art form. What are the struggles that we are experiencing? What were the struggles in that time when we created the work that we were experiencing? A lot of it had to do with finances. They had to do with written agreements that never got fulfilled. They had to do with research in order for how come do we find ourselves having 3 black companies that are major? And I know this might be a racial comment, but it is true. And therefore, Via Kanana took the stance to say, how do we then take this art form, which is strongly a Via Katlehong genre, and how do we take a traditional form, how do we take contemporary dance, how do we take text and research and infuse this into a work?
The younger generation is, in my view, even more dangerous to Africa. The next generation of Africans is waiting for the opportunity to be thieves. Going forward, we must go back to the basics and ask ourselves, as Africans, what it is that we must do.
In the piece, we're talking about many things because of the issue of the media, especially newspapers. There's a part where we are using newspapers. Things are written in those newspapers, like the corruption and so on. These are the issues that disturbing us. So that is why in the show, there's a part where we are using those newspapers with those frustrating articles.
South Africa is full of possibilities and contradictions. And for me to travel through the township of Katlehong was allowing me to go through those possibilities, but also to observe those contradictions.
I came from the contemporary side strongly within what I was doing at that time. And we then met the Via Katlehong crew. They came strongly from isipantsula genre. So I then had to play a role of also trying to teach what the choreographer had in mind, because I had worked very closely with him for a couple of years. And my role mainly, not just as a performing artist, was also to teach my fellow colleagues on the infusing of the contemporary element within the isipantsula side of things. So how we fuse the stuff is that we both, on each side, had to teach each other.
So most of the time, Greg would give us the assignment in terms of isipantsula, and I would be there and be involved because of I understand the technique of isipantsula, and also to help the contemporary artist to do isipantsula in a proper way.
We explored Zulu traditional dance, we explored contemporary dance, and we explored isipantsula. And gumboots dance. Gumboots dance, it originally in our country was formed as a form of communication. So without speaking, but using your body and different rhythms to alert your fellow mine workers that, hey, the employer is coming, or hey, we are in danger, or hey, this is not correct, or hey, how do we speak about this? How do we fight about this? How do we create a form of communication? So one of our major themes was, how do we communicate using our bodies? How do we then take from genres and art forms which already have their inception from communication? How do we then thrive on genres like that? That's why in the work itself you find genres like isipantsula, which is also another form of communication. As much as it's a lifestyle, but also if you listen to some of the rhythms within it, they kind of catch you off guard. That gives you a hint to the type of form in which was chosen.
When I reflect on Via Kanana in terms of what it has been able to do for the creative team, for the dancers in the work, is showing the possibility in terms of the form itself, that it can break barriers and it can travel through the world and showcase what South Africa is about, the possibility that exists in our country, but also bring to the forefront the contradictions that we are subjected to and the extremities of what our country has to deal with on an everyday basis.
The company was formed in 1992 by 4 street dancers in Katlehong. Their aim was to take the kids away from the criminal offenses. Most of the kids were affected by the violences which were happening in Katlehong. So the only way for us to relieve our stress after school, we would go in the class and then we would learn dance, and dance, it became our life.
Seeing it on stage for the first time with lights and a huge audience, it was Dance Umbrella in 2003, and Dance Umbrella, which was headed by Georgina Thompson at that time, gave us the full scope of the genre and what it could be and how it could look like on stage as opposed to on the streets or in a community hall. You know, this time around it was in a theater platform which was opened to various choreographers from different parts of the world.
Many groups, township groups, today compete against each other around who has the best choreography in dance, in Pantsula dance, but also who has the best style in terms of their dress code. So it's very much competitive between the groups themselves, and they're responding very much to their own circumstances. They're responding to the time now that they live in, and they're beginning to tell stories through their own dance.
Through infusing of different genres and through different people collaborating and coming together, we can actually create works of more meaning. isiPantsula is not just entertainment and people moving in fast rhythms and isolations and intrigue movements and props and miming. It's not just that. There is a message behind it.
I would be happy one day if I would see Pantsula having its own qualifications, like diploma, like degree, or certificates of training.
My vision for the future of isiPantsula is for it to actually become part of the dancing curriculum, whether in schools, whether in universities, whether in dance companies. It's for it to be taken seriously just like any other genre, because it's not just known for gangsterism or for the lavish, polished clothing which cover up the actual trauma that one could be feeling. No, isiPantsula is also a form of communication and has played a deep role within South African history as a form of communication, as a form of protest, and as a form of self-expression. So next time when you watch a isiPantsula show or an isiPantsula fused with contemporary or any other genre show, try to look deeper, because there might be a statement that is actually made, just like the inception of the genre itself. It communicates.
Attention please. All passengers stand to the side as the Via Kanana train is approaching on platform 7.